Welcome back to session 4 of our virtual science camp. This is a really exciting session where we're going to bring together everything we have learned so far to create your own weather forecasts. You also get a chance to present your own forecast. As always, if you're joining us for the first time today, welcome, and we hope you enjoyed the session. Additional resources can always be found on the Science Camp website if you want to learn more, as well as in the leader pack.
This session is called Rain or Shine, and we're going to bring all the things we've learnt so far about the weather together to produce a weather forecast. Weather forecasting is what the Met Office is best known for, and indeed weather broadcasts, but that's not all we do. So my name is Claire, and I joined the Met Office as a software engineer, but nowadays I work in a small team, and we are responsible for buying and installing the supercomputers in the Met Office.
Hi everyone, my name is Rachel. I work at the Met Office as a marine scientist, which means that I do a lot of research into sea level rise and storm surges and how that affects coastal communities all around the globe.
Okay, so let's have a look and find out who our customer is, because we need to know who wants to know our forecast, what they want to know, and perhaps why. So this is our challenge.
Hi, I'm Ian Frost, and I'm in charge of the Festival of Flight, an air show which is happening outside London this Saturday, and people are travelling from miles around to see the Crimson Darts, who are due to display at 3 p.m. Now, I've heard it's going to rain. This will be a disaster for the show, as spectators won't want to stand around in the wet, and the visibility will be terrible. So I need your help. If it's going to rain at 3 p.m, I'll move the Crimson Darts display earlier or later to avoid that rain.
Okay, so we've met our customer, Ian Frost. What did he want to know? He was quite specific, wasn't he? He wants to know, is it going to be raining at the air show at 3 o'clock this afternoon? If it is, he will need to change when the Crimson Darts fly, okay? So we've got to bear that in mind. He's being very careful to tell us what he wants to know and when. If we're going to produce a forecast, we know that the first thing we need to do is really understand what's happening now. You can't predict the future if you don't know what's happening now. We call that observations, and we're going to look now at observations for 3 places, okay? We're going to look down here at Plymouth, a blue dot, London, the red dot, and of course that's where the air show actually is, and up here in Scotland, the green dot. So I'm going to show you the observations, and I want you to look really closely at the photographs and decide what it is telling you about the weather. Not just what the weather is, but what's the differences between the weather and those 3 places. So here's our first observation. What can you see? What's it telling you about the weather? That's Plymouth. Let's have a look at London. Okay, again, what can you see? What's it telling you about the weather? What's different between that and Plymouth? And the third location, up in Scotland again, have a look. What's different about that to the other 2 locations? Okay, so we've looked at those 3 locations. These are all for 9 p.m, okay? So we're looking back in time at 9 p.m, and I want you to now have a little chat amongst yourselves, see if you noticed the same things. Did you notice the differences? Okay.
So, how did you get on? The observations that you've been looking at are really helpful, but they only show us the weather in 3 specific locations, and really what we want to look at is the big picture. What's going on with the weather across the rest of the country, or even out in the Atlantic Ocean. How do we do this? Well, we look at satellites and radars. Hopefully, you remember how useful satellite and radar imagery is from your session on observations. For now, we are just going to focus on radar, as Ian Frost is really worried about the rain. What you have here are observations made with a radar system. If you missed the session, here's a top tip for you. Radar works by sending out waves which reflect the rain droplets back to the station. The station can then work out where the rain is. The Met Office has a whole network of radar stations across the UK, which together build up a picture of not only the rain, but also how heavy the rain is in each location. This is the radar image for 9 p.m. on Friday over the UK. There is no radar coverage far out over the ocean, as you can see. The blue colour shows where the rain is more light, the green and the yellow is where the rain is moderate, and the red is heavy rain. So what can we see here? Does it match with the observations that you've been looking at for your 3 stations? Think about how the situation might change over time. Now we need to think all the way back to session 1, where we talked about wind and looked at weather charts. This is a chart of the surface pressure, and it tells us which way the wind will blow. A handy way of remembering this is if you stand with the low pressure on your left-hand side, the wind will be blowing from behind you. This is showing us that the wind will blow from the west to the east across the UK. Which direction do you think the rain over Ireland is going to move in? So now let's look at the observations at 3 a.m. The first one we have here is Plymouth. What do you see? Do you remember what Claire showed you earlier in the day? What are the differences here? The next one, again, we have the observations for London. Again, Scotland. What are the differences here from the earlier observations that we looked at? Did you spot it's now raining in Scotland? Let's check the radar to see if that agrees. So as you can see, there's now a big band of rain stretching into Scotland. But as we observed, Plymouth and London are still dry. You can see Plymouth is a lot closer to the rain band, so it makes sense that there is more cloud in Plymouth. You will notice that although the weather hasn't changed that much in Plymouth, the picture across the country is quite different to before. So you can see why we need different types of observations, ground-based radar, and satellites to have a complete picture of the weather. Now we have added the pressure patterns at 3 a.m. How this will affect the weather, can you figure out which way the wind is blowing? Has it changed, or is it still blowing from the west to the east? Where do you expect the rain to move to? Maybe have a short discussion and see what the people around you also think. So it's now 9 a.m. on Saturday, the day of our air show, and we can do a last round of observations. So here's our first one, Plymouth at 9 a.m. What differences have you noticed since our night shift? The next one here, London, again, what are the differences that you see? What's the weather doing at 9 a.m. today? And finally, our third site up in Scotland. Again, we've got a lovely set of clouds here, some nice sun peeking through. So have you noticed what the differences are from the day before and how the weather's been progressing? So hopefully you've noticed that it was getting cloudier over London. It's very cloudy with some rain in Plymouth. And in Scotland, as I mentioned, the rain is cleared and there's still a bit of cloud around. So shall we see if the weather radar and the surface pressure charts can give us any more information about this? For you, maybe now discuss the next chart in your classes and see what you think you can pull out from this. So looking at the radar, we can see the rain is still a little way from London, but Plymouth is starting to see the rain and Scotland has seen the rain and the rain band move through towards the southeast. But there are still patchy outbreaks of rain around. Though, as our observers have shown, it wasn't raining at our site at the time of the observations. So, if you had to make a guess, what do you think would be happening this afternoon? How do you think it's looking for the air show? Do you think it's going to rain at 3 p.m? Will Ian Frost have to move the Crimson Darts air display? Have a think about this in your class and make some predictions of what's going to happen.
Okay, so Rachel's taken us through very nicely the observations that have been happening overnight, and hopefully you've got an idea of how the weather is developing. Did you decide whether it was going to rain at 3 p.m? Well, of course, our weather forecasters have the advantage of having computer models to help them with their prediction. So a computer model takes all the observations of what's been happening in the weather and it uses maths and physics to work out a prediction. And that's why we need a big supercomputer here at the Met Office, because these models are thousands of lines of software code. We don't just have one model though, we have different models because different models are kind of good at different things. So we have a global model, for example, and that forecasts the weather for the whole world, and that's really good at these high and low pressure systems that you talked about earlier. If we want something that focuses in on the UK, then we have a UK model, and that's really good at local details, so things like fog and thunderstorms. So let's have a look and see how our computer models are looking for now at 9 a.m, okay? And we're going to compare them to the radar. So here's model 1, and here's the rain on model 1. How does that compare to the radar? Can you remember where the radar had the rain? Let's have a look. Okay, so our model rain is really lagging behind, isn't it? What the radar's saying is actually happening. So do we think model 1 is going to give us a good prediction for 3 o'clock this afternoon? No, let's have another look at a different model, shall we? Let's have a look at model 2. Oh. Here the radar rain is behind the computer model. So the computer model's moving that rain too quickly. Shall we try another model? Let's have a look at model 3. Ah, this looks better, doesn't it? We now have our band of rain in the model at the same place as where the radar tells us it actually is. So I think we can probably trust model 3. Hopefully you agree. So what does model 3 tell us about the weather at 3 p.m? Remember, that's the time that Ian Frost wants to know, is it raining, and will the Crimson Darts therefore be able to do their display? So let's have a look. Here's our forecast rain, and you can see our red dot there, can't you? That's London, that's where the air display is. So what are we going to tell Ian Frost? Are we going to tell him it's raining or not raining? How are we going to tell him? He's a busy man and he needs to know quite quickly, really, what's he going to do this afternoon. So perhaps you'd like to have a discussion. How might we present that forecast to our customer? Have a think amongst yourselves and then come back. So, did you decide how it was best to provide that information to Ian Frost? There's lots of different ways you can provide a weather forecast, but as he's busy and being quite precise as to what he needs to know, we would probably just use a phone, text, or even email to let him know. Let's see if he's got our forecast, shall we?
So, you've forecast it to be dry at 3 p.m. That is great news. We'll keep the schedule the same, and the Crimson Darts will be pleased. They'll have time for a spot of lunch before the show. One last thing though, the pilots are about to get their flight pack with all the important documents they need for the flight, and they need a weather brief. Can you put something together?
So Ian Frost is happy that he's got our forecast and the show can go ahead as planned. But the Crimson Darts also need to know what the weather is going to be. So we need to put together a weather brief for the pilots. You can use the briefing template provided to your leaders, also like this that I have here in front of me, to have a go at representing the day's weather with the appropriate symbols shown here on the screen. There is a summary of the weather at the top of the briefing template. In each of the sections, you need to choose the appropriate symbol for the ones for the day. We haven't focused on temperature in this session, but have a think about what might happen to the temperature in the middle of the day when the sun is shining, compared to the morning and the evening, or when the rain comes through. Also, have a think about what can affect the weather and the temperature throughout the day. Anything else that you can think of. So pause the video here and have a discussion about your ideas. So far, we've produced the written forecast. We have our example here on the screen. And we've also produced a verbal forecast for the airshow organiser, Ian Frost. These are what we call an advisory service. An advisory service is one where we have a conversation with the customer to understand their specific needs before providing special tailored forecast advice, especially for them. But who else might be interested in the weather forecast? Yes, I'm guessing if you were going to an air show to look at the planes in the sky all day, you'd be pretty interested in the weather too. So we need to provide a forecast for the public. What do you think is the best way of communicating the weather to the public? Write this down and tell your classmates some ideas and the things that you've come up with. Maybe you thought of some of these, but maybe also look online for information such as video on the web or an app or a TV broadcast. For the last bit of this session, we're going to look at how we put together a TV weather presentation and how you can have a go too.
We have a couple of TV studios here in the Met Office headquarters in Exeter, and we broadcast from here for various TV channels including ITV and for the videos on our website and mobile app. We're actually in one now. You will have seen our presenters also at the start of this video. We have a mobile version of our TV broadcasting equipment which also allows us to do videos out and about, as well as from different places within this building. A special screen is used, it's called a green screen, and it enables a piece of equipment called a mixer to combine the image from a camera over the top of a PC graphics image. We have some graphics which show various headline pieces of weather, temperature and wind, and indeed an outlook. And you can have a go at presenting over the top of these graphics in whichever style that you have available to you. But first, have a think, what makes a good weather broadcast? What might you say? How might you say it? A couple of tips. Really important to get a good start. So think about introducing yourself and greeting your audience, such as, "Good morning, I'm Claire, and I'm going to tell you the weather for today." Another important thing to plan ahead of time is, how are you going to describe the different parts of the country? Scotland, Wales, the South East. And the other thing is, try not to just point to symbols and tell the audience what the symbols are. Think about presenting the forecast as a story. Think about everything we've talked about so far in this session, about how the weather has been changing during the day and therefore how it's going to evolve into the future. Think of it as a story. I suspect at this point you would like to practice your presentations, either with the person next to you or maybe in pairs where you take it in turns to present the weather over our graphics. Maybe you could even film yourselves and send us the videos. That would be fantastic. So have a go now. Welcome back, and I hope your presentations went really well. I can't wait to see some of them. And if you'd really like to share them with us, we would really like to see them. Now we're all done. So one final thing, shall we check in with Ian Frost and see how our forecast turned out? Was it a good forecast?
Great job, guys. You got it right. The rain held off just like you said, and the Crimson Darts were a massive hit. You can now sit back, relax, and enjoy the rest of the show.
What a success! That's all for this session. I hope you've had fun. Remember to send us any questions on forecasting to our email or engage with us on Twitter at MetOfficeLearn.
Maybe you want to know more about how our presenters practice before delivering their forecast to the whole country. Or maybe you're interested in knowing who else we actually present forecasts to. We have a lot of customers here in the Met Office and we communicate in lots of different ways, so perhaps you want to know more about that. We can't wait to hear from you.
Thank you, everybody. It's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me. Goodbye.